Siftpop podcast is recorded in front of a live internet audience.
Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks. We would never call someone a trash panda. Ever. 'Cause that's just rude. It's Siftpop.
It's way, way worse.
It's way, way bad. Welcome to Siftpop, streaming live on Mixlr every Friday afternoon or available to download later in your podcast feed, unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Patrons get those perks. I'm Aaron Dicer from YourMovieFriend.com. I'm joined by Andrew Ormsby from Flick Freaks.
Ahoy!
Every week we'll be joined by a pop culture guru to chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And our guru today, from the Sincast and CinemaSins, it's Chris Atkinson.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Is this it's like a Mr. Rogers Siftpop smash up, you know?
Yes, it is.
Do you have your cardigan on, throwing your shoes, you know, changing out of your work clothes?
Will you be my
I'm
guru?
I'm just casually laying truth bombs on the children watching my show.
Won't you be my guru?
Yeah.
It's going to be a good show. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk Guardians of the Galaxy 2. We're going to chat a little bit about best ever Chris Pratt movies. And, of course, we've got Buried Treasure as well. But first, before we do anything else, we like to do a little bit of Do We Care?
Every single week I scour the internet to find out what is going on in the entertainment world, and I report back to you, and we decide whether or not it is worth talking about. Number one, HBO has hired 4 writers to separately write spin-offs for Game of Thrones. So after this main story concludes, the series will still continue. HBO says it is in no rush for these writers to finish. They want it to be as good as the show is now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I actually hadn't heard this at all. So they're hiring 4 different writers to just take a shot at what a spinoff would be of Game of Thrones.
Because I don't know if you know, there are spin-off books. There's like The Hedge Knight and other like stuff that happens before Game of Thrones.
Written by the same guy?
Yeah, still George R.R. Martin.
Okay.
There's like The Hedge Knight and I can't remember what the other, but there's like 3 of them. So there's actually content there for them to take, way from and just work their way from there.
So this isn't like when Joey had a spinoff of Friends, like.
Yeah, I guess not. Maybe.
Okay.
Who am I to say though? There could very well be a Hound spinoff.
I was going to say, which character would you like to see have their own show, and what kind of show would it be?
Podrick.
What kind of show would that be?
I don't know. Just him. No, I'll take that back because I just realized what that character does. So taking it back. I think actually, you know what? I think the Hound would be actually a pretty fun. I just want him to say "yarp" in the show once.
Yarp.
I want him to say "yarp" once in the show. That's all I need.
What about you, Chris? Are you a Game of Thrones guy?
Yeah. I've seen the series a couple of times actually. Now, watched it like regular, like every season. But then I've watched it back to back, sort of binged it or whatever. So I mean, I don't know if anybody has after this story, like who would really have a good side. I don't know because everybody seems to be kind of tied to this story, and then what do they do after that it's a tough one for me to try to figure out who would make a good a good spinoff. But I mean, everybody's going to want Peter Dinklage to try to continue on. I have a feeling, it's sort of like I think that would be the popular choice. Although if this is going the way everybody thinks it's going, then he might be a part of the royalty by the end of it. He's not going to have much to do after that. So
I will tell you this. I am so excited for Game of Thrones to come back. I cannot wait to see how they finish this out. I think you're totally right, Chris. I totally get the appeal of prequels, right? Because with a prequel, you don't have to worry about the fact that so much has already come to a dramatic conclusion, and then trying to figure out, well, how is there anything but something that's that doesn't feel like the 13 different ends of Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Like where it's right. Like it just you don't need anything else. And somebody in the chat actually said, "I miss the days when things could just come to an end." And I think there's some truth there too. It's like tell a great story. But if it were a prequel, I'd like to see some of the what was the character? Is he called the Viper? What was the one who he was real? I loved that character. I just wonder what what his story is, where he's been, whether it's prequel stuff or whatever. I don't know. That's one I thought of.
He has a pretty great backstory as far as what they've said in the show.
Right.
He's very important to the story as a whole. We just get some we just get some sort of, exposition about it or whatever. But a lot of what he is tied to, a lot of the surprises of the show. So,
yeah.
He would be an awesome character to follow around.
I thought of one. So they're always talking about the Mad King Targaryen.
Yeah.
I think that would actually be something pretty fun to watch. The reign of the Mad King.
Yeah, kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
The mini-faced man.
Definitely.
The mini-faced man was mentioned in the
really
chat.
Cool too.
That's a good one.
So some good stuff there.
Yeah.
I would say that out of if they're going to have somebody, you're going to have 4 people go off and make and write scripts and everything. I sort of trust HBO on this because I think they would be able to. I think they would be able to come up with something good out of this. Although you're right. I mean, it's one of your listeners is right. Why can't it just end? It's great if it would just end. But HBO has a pretty good track record, and if they're starting now and they're trying to get something for a couple years from down the road, I would trust them on that.
So here's a question for you, Aaron. Did Breaking Bad end?
Yeah.
Because Better Call Saul's going on right now.
See, I think that's the perfect example of how to do it. Like it's prequel, so it doesn't feel anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Although it does touch on Saul's life after Breaking Bad, and it's a character that wasn't fully understood in the show itself or fully expanded. So that's a great backstory to hear. With Better Call Saul, which I love and am loving this season, I still think, especially this season, I still think they're trying too hard to tie into some of the Breaking Bad characters, but I love what they're doing with Saul and his brother. Like, that's just, man, the story work there is so good.
That is the main reason why I watch the show, is that dynamic between those two.
Yeah.
Number 2, this really isn't, entertainment world based, but it is something. Before I say what's going to happen here, it has a happy ending, okay?
Okay.
Yesterday, or 2 days ago, I should say by now, 2 days ago, a school in Wisconsin was evacuated after a parent saw someone entering a school wearing dark clothing and a mask. Turns out it was a little kid celebrating May 4th. He was dressed as Darth Vader.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's just a funny story.
Yeah,
It
was a slow news week, Aaron. Sorry.
It's the time we live in, right? I mean, it's hard not to cast suspicion on anything that you see that's just a little bit out of the ordinary. And working at a movie theater the day after the Dark Knight Rises thing happened.
Oh yeah.
There was a certain, just maybe it's just me projecting or whatever, but there was a certain eerie sense of like quiet about people going to watch movies. And then, of course, we got somebody who came out and said that somebody's acting really weird in this one auditorium and everything. And it happened to be a regular who had special needs. But, it was one of those type of things where everybody's just like really heightened on everything. And they had to report on whatever because, you never know. And everything, so that is a funny story. It's also something I think, unfortunately, we're probably going to have to deal with a lot of that. So
yeah,
the kids will just have to change into their Darth Vader outfits once they're inside the school.
Exactly.
So everybody is supervised.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And because of the subject matter, I decided to let by the pun that you were projecting as a projectionist. I thought that was very very interesting. You might be projecting,
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
right. No, you are correct to think that. Think of that pun.
Number 3, a potential miniseries entitled "Shattered" is in the works, based off the book. It is about Hillary Clinton losing the 2016 presidential election. Already, and I think FX is going to pick it up, kind of like the what was the People vs. OJ, the
OJ.
American Horror Story? I think it might be one of those.
American Crime Story,
American
actually.
Crime Story.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on your leniencies and your party affiliations, it might be American Horror Story. It depends on who you are.
Yeah.
But already, it's been 6 months, and they're already thinking about doing this.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, HBO has gone through almost every single big moment in American politics. They've made a movie out of it. There's there's Sarah Palin, there's the housing bubble, there's all the real the financial crisis, all that. They've done something on almost every one of those. And maybe they took a couple years to really sort it out. Who knows how long it'll take for them to make such a series for FX, but maybe they'll have some distance by the time it comes out.
I was talking with somebody about this recently. I think our entertainment culture is trying to, and I think there's real negatives to this and a few positives to this, but I think our entertainment culture is trying to pick up the slack of our news culture because, the people aren't as apt with as many different news sources there are, and I put news in quotes with a lot of those. What is real, what isn't real, and I think entertainment culture is saying, hey, we can be, quote unquote, kind of journalistic and put this stuff on the screen, and we're going to make it entertaining. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's almost the reverse of what The Daily Show was, right? The Daily Show was we're going to take news and we're going to make it entertaining, and what Hollywood seems to be doing right now is taking entertainment and then putting news in it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting way that we're getting our information, because what I'm curious about is, are those details that I didn't know about the story? And here's the thing with a movie, they make some of that stuff up. It's just
dramatization.
Yeah. So it's hard to know because true stories aren't always true stories. That's why I like documentaries, that are closer to the moment than actual entertainment.
Yeah.
For me.
And then before Dark Tower trailer came out. No, I'm joking. Yep, that's going to wrap it up for Do We Care?
You can talk about the Dark trailer. The Dark trailer.
Yeah.
The Dark Tower trailer if you want. I know you're really pumped about that movie.
Well, my hesitancy and the stuff I was nervous about was right there in the trailer. So now I'm still just as, if not more, nervous. So
you're still pretty nervous about it?
Still pretty nervous.
I have not seen this trailer yet, but I've heard nothing but across the board about it.
Here's this might sound spoilerish, but I saw a lot of stuff that was never in the books.
Yeah.
So I can, and there's people saying well, it's about this over here. I'm like, that's Hollywood making a cop out to where they don't have to make the books. So I don't want to I don't want to say too much because it does get into spoiler territory. So
sure.
But the action scenes look cool, but I don't want this to be an action movie. So
it's hard, right? It's hard when you love the source material,
right? Much as
because especially when you really love the source material of something, it's really hard for them to get it right. That's one of the most amazing things that I think is often overlooked about Lord of the Rings is how vehemently people love the source material, and yet still those movies were well accepted by even a lot of the hardcore fans, even though they changed some things, left some things out. That's tough to do when you have that kind of deep care for source material.
Well, you got to think with Lord of the Rings, half of those books were songs. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch a musical Lord of the Rings. So thank you, Peter Jackson, for that one.
Lord of the Ringtones.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's going to wrap it up for Do We Care?
All right. Let's move on to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
The fate of the universe lies on your shoulders. Now, whatever you do, don't push this button. Because that will set off the bomb immediately, and we'll all be dead. Now, repeat back what I just said.
I am Groot.
No! No, that's the button that will kill everyone. Try again.
I am Groot.
Mm-hmm.
I am Groot.
Uh-huh.
I'm Groot.
No!
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Peter Quill and his fellow Guardians are hired by a powerful alien race called the Sovereign to protect their precious batteries from invaders. After a poor choice, the Sovereign dispatch their armada to search for vengeance. As the Guardians try to escape, the mystery of Peter's parentage begins to be revealed. Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. How long ago was the first one? It's like 3 years, maybe.
2014 or 2015.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 3 years ago.
2014.
2014, the original one comes out. 3 years later, following up a huge monetary hit, a huge critical success, trying to see if they can kind of live up to all that stuff. Let's talk about it. Let's first just really quickly, did you like it, love it? It was just okay, dislike it, or hated it? Andrew, you first.
Man, I loved the first Guardians of the Galaxy so much, and this was one of the movies I had pegged to be one of the best of the year, but honestly, I'm in between okay and liked it.
All right, so you're kind of on the the disappointed, okay, wanted to love it, but I just liked it train.
Yeah.
Okay,
actually, in between okay and liked it, so.
Okay.
Even worse than I thought.
Okay, what about you, Chris?
Total agreement with Andrew there.
Man.
Total agreement.
All right.
Aaron?
Total disagreement. I loved it.
Okay. Well, good.
I had so much fun at this movie. And maybe I'll start there because I think that's Marvel's trump card. I really do. Marvel gets how, just to give you a fun experience. Like, even if parts of it fall apart, in certain ways or whatever, like, when you go to a Marvel movie, like, I'm going to have this goofy grin on my face because it's funny, it's clever, it's, fun to look at. I just had a blast. I loved it. I'm excited to hear some of your negatives because I know I miss that stuff when I get on like a movie high. And right from the beginning, I was on a movie high on this one, and I just, I fell in love with it. So
yeah, I have 5 negatives. So
I probably had my purple colored glasses on in watching this one. So
Aaron, you loved it. Why don't you start us off with some pros?
I can absolutely do that. Like I said, it's really fun. I think the visuals are absolutely spectacular. I said in my review, I feel like it gives Doctor Strange a run for its money in the visuals department. And I don't just mean like the action visuals. I mean the way these scenes were framed, the way they used colors. It was very artistic. It's one of the things I love about this franchise is that it's interesting because it's this goofy, quirky, silly kind of movie, and yet they're doing things both in the emotion department and in the artistic department that you would think of would be more for, kind of a higher, standard kind of movie. So I thought the visuals were absolutely spectacular. What did you think?
Soundtrack, just as awesome as the first one. I love soundtrack in this one. I don't know who they hired, to pick that playlist, but they nail it with both movies. So kudos on that front.
Yeah,
because the movie or the music in these movies is so vital that it's a character. The music is character in this movie, and if you don't get it right, then a lot of the movie will fall apart. So I got to give it credit there. What
did you like, Chris, about it?
I am conflicted about this movie because I thought the movie was really funny. I really thought it was funny. And you're going to get into my sort of weird way I look at movies a lot of times, where just because a movie does one thing well doesn't mean the rest of it is something that I'm high on. But I think most of the time when it's trying to be funny, it's great. But when it's not trying to be funny, that's where I have problems.
Yeah, totally agree. I know exactly what he's talking about.
Okay, so I think I know what it's coming down to. Where I disagree with the two of you is probably with the emotional stuff, because that stuff worked for me, and it's sounding like it didn't work for you guys.
There is a scene in this movie where it's supposed to portray parental bonding.
Yeah.
And it's one of the dumbest scenes I've ever seen in a Marvel movie.
Really?
Easily.
You're talking about the catch?
Easily one of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
But that was purposeful. Like, they did that on purpose.
It was so dumb.
All right, listen, I want to have this out with you in the spoilers so we can go into some details about the scene. I know the exact scene you're talking about. And I know why you would feel that way.
You know what's? It's funny. I put that on the side of the part of the humorous part that I liked. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's for me. It's more about there's just other things about it that I ultimately ruin the entire. Well, not the entire experience, but ruin the movie on the whole for me. So.
I think I'm agreeing on Chris on. I think what he's trying to say, and if it is, then I agree, whenever they try and portray emotional, like serious moments, they try and trickle in a little bit of humor, but they trickle in a little too much, and it kind of ruins that emotional moment.
See, that I completely 100% feel the opposite as you.
Okay,
And
we're gonna when spoilers, we can get into specifics.
some of
on
the
that.
detailed scenes, and there are several of them. This movie, it's like that's what this movie was made to do, is to have these emotional moments that are also silly and funny. And I was, in fact, it kind of blew my mind for me how much it worked, how much I was feeling the emotion of it, and at the same time kind of laughing and even a bit rolling my eyes at the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult to do. And for me, I felt like I gave the movie props for being able to pull that off as much as they did. And here's the other thing, and I'll mention this in the positives before we really kind of turn into the negatives. I love these characters, and I was blown away by how well they serve each character's story in this amount of time. Because there are a lot, they're serving not only their 5 main characters, well, I guess 4, because, Baby Groot's Baby Groot, you're not really serving a lot there.
Just adorableness. Oh,
Just
he's so
adorableness.
adorable.
And he's so stinking. That's all my wife talked about all the way home, was how adorable Baby Groot was.
Yeah.
And you're not only serving those 4 main stories, you're also serving some secondary stories in some pretty amazing ways too. Mm-hmm. And they all have they all have that moment of something they learn or something they go through or something that, and that's really hard to do for that many characters. So I applauded that as well.
I have one more pro that I would like to mention. So something that they definitely made better from the original one is we finally have a villain in this movie that has a personality. In Guardians 1, Ronan was bad because reasons. And in this one, the villain, I don't want to, say too much, but the villain actually has a personality. There's a backstory that you can kind of understand.
The story makes sense.
The story makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose for it. And I thought that, that's really what was missing from the first one. Granted, there's more stuff that they got right in the first one than in this one, but that is one area they definitely improved on.
Man, I was excited to have the conversation which one's better, and it's obvious that you guys, I'm sure, feel the first one's much better.
Easily.
Is that true for you too?
Yeah.
You liked the first one too, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, the first one was a nice surprise, and the second one, although what I'm most impressed with is how they didn't do the self-aware type of, humor where I was a little worried about it on the first action scene because there was some self-awareness going on there, but throughout the rest of it, it was the humor was really great. So I was really impressed with that. And I think it might even be, on the whole, a funnier movie. It's just not a better movie.
Yeah.
I might be able to agree with. I think I might be able to land there that it's a funnier movie, but not necessarily a better movie. I think it's much closer to as good to the first one as you guys probably do, but I think I still would put the first one just inches above this one in my opinion.
Oh, well, hey, I'm glad you liked it as much as you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we start sending it?
You want to start ripping on it?
Yeah.
I do want to ask one more question before we do.
Okay.
I mentioned that I thought the story stuff worked, and you mentioned that the villain had a story that made sense. And did you feel like that the plot and story part of this movie felt like it was cohesive enough for you, or did you feel like there were holes?
For this movie, yes. For the cinematic universe, it didn't fit in at all.
Is that a bad thing? I mean,
see, that's the thing, because we've always been complaining, why does every single Marvel movie have to tie into the next one? Mm-hmm. Here's one that really doesn't tie into this big, grandeur story as a whole, but for this, at the same time, I didn't think it was as good a movie as the other ones, which is weird, because the thing I've been wishing for this whole time let me down.
That's interesting. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, this is one of the big parts of why I didn't like this movie was the story. There's a point in this where there's nothing happening. We don't know what the real reason we're watching this movie is until about 2/3 of the way into it. We don't know who really, who we're supposed to worry about, or what sort of plot is in the air that we're like, oh no, how are they going to solve this? Because they sort of dump it on you by the end of the movie. And so they're sitting on a planet for a really long time, and they're just having discussions about their relationships and stuff. So you have a lot of just a lot of stuff that just doesn't work for me.
Interesting.
So it takes a long time for this movie to be about what it's supposed to be about. And there's some things kind of hanging up in the air leading into that or whatever, but it's nothing that makes me go, well, why should I keep watching? There's nothing in there that says that.
Interesting. I think there's a distinction to be made, and maybe I'm wrong here, between the plot and the themes. Because I think the themes are introduced early, and I'm such a theme person. Like, when I look at story, a lot of it for me is about, is the theme cohesive? Is the theme meaningful? Those kind of things. And the family theme in this was introduced very early, like you mentioned, their relationships and working through those kind of things. And that kind of ties the whole movie together for me. And because I was invested in the thematic part of the story, I didn't notice what you're saying, which I think is correct, that the plot, the quote-unquote plot part of the story, really kind of leaves you hanging for most of the movie. You really don't know what you're rooting for or what you want plot-wise. Is that am I stating that correctly?
Yeah, that's my main issue with it is I feel like, and we'll get into this in the spoilers, obviously, but I feel like if you're any kind of savvy moviegoer, you kind of know what is going to happen.
Sure.
Like, you may not know the exact way they get to it, but you kind of already know that, and they sort of waste our time getting to that point, because I feel like they could have gotten to that a lot earlier and gotten into the main meat of this, and they still could have had the same kind of movie. It's just that it just takes forever to get to that point.
I completely understand what you're saying. I would only take issue with the phrase "waste our time," because they're giving us such fun stuff to look at in adventure stuff.
Poor choice of words.
Well,
choice of words.
But
that's what I mean is that it doesn't fill it in with, you should just go ahead and get to what you're trying to get to, and then you can deal with all the other stuff. So.
Yes, yeah. And I think what I'm saying is the reason that I wasn't aware of it, and I'm glad we're talking about it because it's a valuable insight, is because I was having so much fun. And again, that's what I mean when I say Marvel's trump card is the fun card. If you're going to have a fun time, for most people especially, and we all have different levels of the things that we watch or how intently we watch a movie. But if you're having a blast, the other stuff, you can kind of forgive it and kind of miss it. And I am certainly guilty of that. I'll sit in a seat and enjoy a good movie like this, and I'll just be like, I'm having fun. Yeah. And it told me enough and made me feel enough that I had a good time. I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah. I do agree with Chris that the pacing in this movie was off, because there were parts whenever you finally got to an area of the movie like that progressed the story. In my mind, I was going, man, you could have gotten to that part 20, 15 minutes earlier, and it would have served better to cut out all that excess, just to make it a more crisp, clean movie. Here's my main problem with this movie. The writing in the first one was sharp and crisp, and I loved it. The witty, dialogue-driven banter of the first one is replaced with literal toilet humor. And I thought the movie could have been better than that. It should have been better than that.
I remember one toilet joke, but I wouldn't have said that like this. I wouldn't have said, like, I would say that about a movie like Shrek or something like that, where it feels like every joke is kind of bathroom humor, but I thought a lot of these jokes were clever.
I found a lot of them along the lines of something you'd see in like a Judd Apatow or Seth Rogen movie.
Really? I didn't get that feeling at all. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I got to that point. I found myself laughing in this movie quite a bit. And even the bathroom humor one I thought was so absurd that that it was good enough for me. Like, it wasn't just the fact that somebody farting or whatever. It's it's not anything like that where the bathroom humor is just, oh, well, isn't that funny? It makes funny noises and stuff like that. This was more of a dialogue based bathroom humor, and I thought it was funny.
And it's character based too. Yeah. It's part of that character.
Yeah.
We're talking about Drax.
Yeah.
The Drax character is probably my favorite humor wise in the series.
Mine too.
And it's because
steals the movie.
Yeah, it's because he is direct about everything. So even when it's quote unquote bathroom humor, it's really funny because it's Drax and he has no filters, rather than it's funny because you're mentioning poop. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference there.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It's funny. It's really funny. I just preferred the humor of the first one, where it was back and forth, sharp jabs at each other. That's the humor that I liked of the first one. And another thing about this is, if it wasn't toilet humor, it was kind of nostalgic 8-bit humor. Like, there were jokes that you would notice in like a Scott Pilgrim versus the World movie, and I was like, really, that doesn't belong in this.
Oh, it so belongs in this. That's the whole sense of humor of this movie, is that quirky, goofy silliness. Like, this is the movie it belongs in, is what I'm saying. It doesn't belong in Iron Man or, those movies, but if it's going to be in a movie, this is the one.
No, I disagree on that one. Just because it's the closest to that humor doesn't mean that it's still close enough. I think it's still separated enough to where, like, you leave all that stuff out. Like, it's hard to, I can't explain too much without getting into spoilers, but yeah, I'll definitely touch on that one again.
The main negative I had was there's a lot of exposition in this movie, and it is also actually the same main negative I had with the first Guardians movie. There's a lot for us to have to know, and the reason it doesn't bother me to the extreme is because that knowledge is important to me feeling what I feel for these characters. And I think they give it to us in a fun enough way, whether it be characters' powers or what they do or, how they're going to work into the plot. They find a fun and clever way to give it to us, even though it's exposition. So, there's a little bit of cherry flavoring in the cough syrup. And that was enough for me to let it go down. But I did notice a lot of exposition in the movie.
There's a race of beings introduced into this movie who are supposed to be in another branch of comedy. I found them annoying.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what you're talking about. Bring it back up again in the spoilers.
They're introduced at the very beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Found them annoying.
Yeah, well, I think you're supposed to find them annoying.
Yeah, but not good annoying. The more I'm talking about, the more I'm realizing, man, I had fun in this movie, but I didn't like. I liked it because I would watch it again. I had a good time, but for a critical review, I didn't think it was nearly as good.
Well, and see, this is the other thing that I've talked about being a movie reviewer. One thing I've tried to maintain is the idea of being a movie viewer versus being a movie critic. And I much lean towards just being a movie viewer to tell you kind of what your experience is going to be, viewing the movie, those kind of things. I'm willing to talk about that other stuff, and I think that stuff can be valuable and important. But, and I guess that's part of my role as a movie optimist too, is just like, giving it the benefit of the doubt, having a good time if you can have a good time. And like, if you're going to give me a choice between Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and half the stuff that's already come out this year, man, go see this movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a fun ride, even with, the problems that you guys are talking about and that I actually understand and agree with.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What about you, Chris? What are some other negatives?
The action, and this is something that I've always had a problem with in Marvel movies, and that even goes all the way back to, the hallowed ground of the Avengers and everything like that. But the action in this movie is, I think, awful. Generally, whenever you have characters who are essentially the same strength at the end, and they're just throwing each other around and that type of thing, and it's like, let's see how hard I can slam you into this, and here's a fist fight and everything, I just tune out. I can't deal with it, and there's so much stuff going on all at once, especially in that finale, that I get bored with that type of action. I'm looking for one of these movies to do something that where it's someone's strength, and someone has the two opponents have two different strengths and they have different weaknesses, and they both try to exploit those weaknesses instead of just punching each other a bunch.
It's Man of Steel syndrome.
Yeah, it really is. And apparently people saw Man of Steel and saw that ending and said, that's what I want to do in my movie. So there's been that a bunch lately. So that happened a bunch, and then now there is one I thought clever action scene in this, and it's just because of the way it's presented and everything. I mean, in the end, you're still just dealing with drones, but I think that one scene was good. Everything else, though, that whole entire finale, I was like, just come on, get on with it already.
They do give you some. There's some subversiveness to how they approach the typical Marvel stuff that I appreciated. Again, in spoilers, I can talk more specifically, but they intersperse moments of subversiveness through that typicalness that I like. There's a moment where the two baddies are going at it, or the two main people are going at it at the end, where you think it's going to be one thing and then it's something completely ridiculous, and so it's subversive in that way. There's the hero shot that every Marvel movie has is subverted at the end of it. So I like that this movie is a little like that, but I totally get your point. I see what you're saying, Chris.
Yeah. One last thing?
Yeah, let's do one last thing. One last thing about the movie before we move on. I'll start. My one last thing is and I say it every time, I'm so tired of Stan Lee cameos. They're not funny to me. At this point, they completely take me out of the movie. His cameo wasn't the only cameo in the movie that completely took me out of the movie. There were a couple.
Yep.
There were a couple moments where I was like, yeah, that didn't quite land like you wanted it to.
Yeah.
That's my one last thing.
James Gunn struck gold with the first one. This time he only hit copper.
That's your one last thing.
That would, if I were to write a review, that would be my title.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your one last thing, Chris?
I mean, I guess ultimately, if you like the first Guardians of the Galaxy, you're going to really like this one. It wasn't the same for me this time.
I agree.
So, there you go. Man, I loved it so much more than you guys. I guess that's just my role is to love things, but of course, I just came off giving a movie a D-. So
yeah. Now, like I said, I had a lot of fun in this movie. I really did. I don't want it to come across as I hated the movie.
Our theater was full of laughter the entire time.
We did see this in IMAX Laser.
Yeah, that is true as well. Should mention that. Maybe that's again why the visuals seem so incredible to me.
Yeah.
When it went to full IMAX,
I still have yet to experience that.
When it went to full IMAX, did you notice? Like, do you notice that when you're watching an IMAX movie and it's
boom,
when it goes full screen and you get the top and the bottom that you don't get at a regular theater? Mm-hmm. It's mind blowing to me every time.
Yeah,
it's just like wow.
Yeah,
it fills up the entire room. So yeah, I did enjoy that experience. So that was a good part of it for sure. Let's move on to the best ever challenge. We'll do best ever Chris Pratt movies. Each of us will pick 3 movies, and then some honorable mentions we'll talk about at the end. We'll go from number 3 to number 1. If you've got a movie higher, feel free to trump it, and we'll talk about it when it comes to you.
Trump.
So let's start at number 3. Andrew, why don't you kick us off? What's your number 3 best ever Chris Pratt movie? And again, just to clarify, not best ever Chris Pratt performances, best ever movies that Chris Pratt is in.
That's right, because this movie actually doesn't star Chris Pratt. He's in it, but it really stars Amy Adams, Joaquin Phoenix, and Scarlett Johansson. I'm going to go with her.
Trump.
Okay, I had a feeling.
Yeah, I will trump that one.
All right.
What about you, Chris? What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Moneyball.
Nice.
Here's an honorable mention.
Yeah, I had that in my honorable mentions as well. Talk about it a little bit.
Well, I mean, of course, in this he's not a big character. He's playing Scott Hatteberg, who's a journeyman catcher who they've converted into a first baseman.
I love that scene.
And it's great. Yeah, he's like, is first base very hard? And he's like, oh, you'll learn it. And he's like, it's incredibly hard. It's like, the guy playing Ron Washington. But Moneyball is obviously Brad Pitt's movie, and you have a little bit of Philip Seymour Hoffman in there and Jonah Hill, and but I love baseball so much, and I've read the book of Moneyball, and it was kind of interesting to see how they turned that into a drama, and I think they turned it into a really good one. So
I totally agree. That's the biggest surprise for me of Moneyball is the subject matter and the kind of movie they turned it into. It was genius. I was like, it's so weird because it's not a movie made for baseball fans. It's a movie made for movie fans. And I think a lot of times creators forget that when they're dealing with source material. They think they have to go for a certain audience, and man, make a great movie and everybody will enjoy it. So I think that's the key to Moneyball for me.
All right.
My number 3 is the Lego Movie.
Trump.
I figured you might.
Yeah.
All right. What's your number 2, Andrew?
Zero Dark 30.
Yeah, that's my number 2 as well. So we can go ahead and talk about it.
Okay. Man, that movie. I can't even. I don't even know where to begin. From beginning to the end of that movie, I am drawn in and captivated by what is going on screen. I think, especially the ending. The ending is like you can't look away because there's no music. It's quiet, and it draws you in, and the whole movie is building up to that moment. What she goes through to Jessica Chastain, what she goes through to try and get Bin Laden, I've never believed. I never wanted to believe more in a character. I'm like, you can do it. Don't give up. I know you can do it with that kind of determination. She steals that movie, and that ending scene just turns that movie up to 11.
She has some incredible moments in that movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. I think Chris Pratt is great in that movie, too. I love that band of, anytime there's a band of brothers kind of thing going on with that kind of stuff, it always gets to me.
And he's listening to Tony Robbins on his way to kill Bin Laden.
So good.
All right. Chris, you're number 2?
Strangely enough, I also have Zero Dark 30 here.
Oh,
okay.
We all had it at number 2.
Nice. Did you want to say anything on it?
No, everything that you said is exactly what I love about that movie. I do love how this is, her journey through all this, trying to get Bin Laden and everything. Especially with the, you see all the different scenes in there where, like, she's in the boardroom and they want to get a percentage of certainty, and she's like 100%. 100% this is the right guy. And then she says, okay, 99%, since I know that a total certainty freaks you guys out, but, whatever, and then, like, of course, her continuing to go up and erase the amount of days it's been since, the last information she had could be used or whatever. And it's like 90 days or whatever. It gets super long, and it's like more and more they wait, the more he could move out of that compound. And then, by the end of it, like you said, that very final scene where she's on the plane by herself and she just breaks down is excellent. But yeah, Chris Pratt, sort of secondary to all this, but yeah, it is funny that he's listening to Tony Robbins on the way to this mission. It's pretty awesome.
I have to ask a question. I know we've already started. This is only movies, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You can't throw Parks and Rec in there.
I can't throw Parks and Rec. Okay. That would be my number 1.
Well, because it would probably be number 1 out of all this.
Exactly.
I mean, if you were to go with, like, Chris Pratt performances, I would definitely put it number 1.
Yeah, and what a great Parks and Rec. How many careers did that show launch? Like, it's just incredible.
All of them.
Yeah,
all the careers.
Well, Polar was already, a known quantity, really, but everybody else, you think of like Offerman and Aziz, and they were just kind of working their way up.
Because I only remember Nick Offerman from 2 movies before that: Men Who Stare at Goats and Wrist Cutters. Those are the only 2 movies I know him from. So
interesting.
What's weird about that show is it never was a big ratings type of show. But basically, a bunch of people got way too big for it. By the time it was, getting to its, what was it, 6-7 seasons it went?
Yeah, something like that.
People got way too big. Chris Pratt was I can't remember if he had done Jurassic World or Guardians or something like that. It was something big, and he had already just gotten to that point where he was just way too big for that show. You see him on the show, and you're like, wow, it's just, it doesn't seem right anymore.
Yeah, because he just did Zero Dark 30, and then I guess it was a couple months he had to try and get fat again just to get back to playing Andy. But he didn't get fat enough. And everybody was like, wow, you lost a lot of weight over the summer. He's like, yeah, I stopped drinking beer. How much beer were you drinking?
It's amazing. All right, let's go to our number 1s. Andrew, kick us off.
You know what my number 1 is?
I do.
It's the Lego Movie. Oh, I can't tell you how much I love this movie. It was my number 1 movie of 2014. And
what do you think it is? Why do you think it's like next level for you?
Because everybody in this movie is perfect. Like, there could not have been a better cast of actors for those specific roles. Morgan Freeman is brilliant. He's one, if not the funniest part of that movie. Liam Neeson is hilarious.
I think Will Arnett's the funniest part of that movie.
Lego Batman.
Yeah.
That's the best Batman.
That whole movie is the funniest part of that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Can I spoil something from the Lego movie? Can I go ahead?
Sure, go ahead.
Morgan Freeman's death is... I was crying. I was laughing so hard. There's something I have to tell you. It'll change the course of history. And then what's his name? Is it Charlie or Charlie Day or what's his name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Spaceship.
Yeah.
Spaceship.
Yep.
Oh, it's the best. Oh, I love it. It's the perfect movie. It's the perfect movie. It's in my
a
top.
lot of fun.
It's in my top 100 of all time.
It does that quick rapid fire humor style.
Yeah.
Better than almost any movie I've ever seen. You know. So yeah, it's great stuff. What's your number one, Chris?
I have Her as my number one. And I love Lego Movie too. I have it as sort of an honorable mention here, but when I was comparing it to these other three movies, I was like, well, I think all these other three movies are better than it, but sort of have the same issue. I mean, not issue, but same thing here. Lego Movie might be the more entertaining out of all those movies, but I think as far as best and overall quality, I'm going to go Her on this.
I am with you. That's my number one as well. That movie, it nailed me, and I mentioned earlier how much I'm a sucker for themes and thematic material. And man, I did not know Spike Jonze had that in him. That was just
Is that his best movie?
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's what it is for me. You know what it is for me? All the futuristic sci-fi movies you see, you can go, oh, it could end up being like that. Cars could end up being like that. With Her, I walked out going, oh, that is how the future is going to be. That is absolutely the future. And it feels so real. It just feels like that is exactly where we're heading with computer technology. And I mean, other than maybe this is a little spoilerish, maybe other than what the AI in that movie ends up doing might be a little out there, but still, just the concept of the technology was just so real to me. And I love Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that movie. I think it's subtle and brilliant and wonderful. I really enjoy that. So that's my number one.
I didn't mean to laugh over you. I was just reading the comments.
No, I saw that. You had a much better answer for why you like the Lego movie, which is everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Good job, the BDG.
You guys want to mention some honorables?
I only have 3 because Moneyball was already mentioned. Actually, I'm not going to lie. I thought The Magnificent Seven was a fun movie. It's not a good movie, but it's a fun movie.
It's not close to a good movie, but you're right. There are some fun moments in that.
Yeah. If anybody mentions Passengers, then I will debate you that that's a good movie. Please don't do it.
We've already had that debate on this podcast. So,
Chris, you're going to be outnumbered on this one because Aaron and I both like Jurassic World. It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. Yeah. Sorry.
It's a fun movie for me to poop on, as one of our great stand-up comics has said.
That's right. One of the greats. Yeah.
No, you're totally fine to like Jurassic World. I hate it. I hate it so much. But my other mention here would be the first Guardians.
Yeah, it's worthy of a mention.
So I'll put that there, and you guys can wax poetic about Jurassic World.
Honestly, Jurassic World boils down to that final fight scene just being the kid in me is like, move over, 30-year-old Andrew. This is my moment. I've waited for this for over 20 years to see this, and it's happening.
Yeah.
And it happened.
The only one that hasn't been mentioned that's in my honorable mentions is one of his first performances was actually in Angela Jolie's Wanted. Did you guys ever see Wanted?
I hated that movie.
Oh, you hated that movie?
I did. I don't remember him in it, though.
He's the one who gets hit in the face with the keyboard. He's the annoying...
Yeah, the annoying coworker.
Yeah.
It's been since it came out, since I've seen it. So.
I actually have a soft spot in my heart for Angelina Jolie action movies. I think she's a really good action star. I've enjoyed Wanted. I've enjoyed some of her other stuff.
I was thinking it was Salt. Is the one I was thinking of.
Salt is another one. So
Salt and Pepper.
So I enjoyed that one for what it was. It's not a horrible movie. I know it didn't win any Oscars or anything, but it's interesting that you remember it enough to hate it.
Yeah, well, I remember because whenever you hate a movie, you remember it. So
it's true. Yeah. That's true. I think that's it. I mean, he's been in some other stuff, but, nothing necessarily worth mentioning.
Honestly, I think a lot of people are just like, no, it's Parks and Rec, and that's why he doesn't have that big grandeur of like an IMDb page of like, oh, he's been in this amazing movie. He's a superstar, but it's because of Parks and Rec. And then he became the funny fat guy who became the funny, ridiculously handsome guy. So it's just not fair.
He has a charm that it's hard to resist.
Yeah.
He's a really funny dude, and there are just certain people on screen. I noticed this during watching Guardians yesterday. There are just certain people who belong on a big screen, and he's one of them. And he's a fun, cool dude.
I think if you put him and The Rock in a movie together, just the charismatic, charming nature of both of those guys would be too much to handle.
The universe would implode.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
I think that's got to happen in the next 3 years, right? There's got to be a Pratt Rock movie is like in the works. Somebody's got to have that going.
Yeah. Well, I feel kind of the same way a little bit about Zac Efron. He's really likable too, and so we've got Baywatch coming up with The Rock and Efron. So we'll see. Maybe the world will cease to exist.
I'm excited for that one.
Before we move on to the final moments of the podcast, did want to mention the Patreon feed. If you are a supporter of the Studio DNA Podcast Network, you get a special podcast feed that has all the bonus material already in it. So all of the pre-shows, like for instance, during our pre-show today, Chris did his list of shame, mentioned 4 movies that he hadn't seen and 1 that he had. We tried to guess which one. So that's available to all of our Patreon supporters at any level. All you got to do is support at patreon.com/StudioDNA. Thank you for doing that. It really is what makes this podcast and others possible on the network. So thank you for doing that. All right, before we get to the finish, let's go on a Sift quest. Each week we will venture forth together on a quest for answers. If you have burning pop culture questions, need an argument settled, or have a cultural conundrum, simply tweet me at Aaron Dicer or email feedback@siftpop.com. Today's Sift Quest was launched by Brian via email. Here's the question. What's an amazing scene from a movie you hate? For instance, I can't stand the Matrix sequels, but love that freeway scene in Reloaded. What do you guys think? Chris, we'll start with you. What's an amazing scene that you love watching in a movie that you absolutely hate?
Okay, so I have one easy one and one more obscure one. In the easy one would be Star Wars: The Phantom Menace's fight between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan.
That was one of mine.
You stole mine.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect example. Yeah.
Oh, man,
it's the easiest one.
Yeah,
sure. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry to have stolen that, but it really is the easiest one. The one that I have as far as obscure is it's not a movie I hate necessarily, but I don't remember it being all that great. We Own the Night, which had Joaquin Phoenix and Robert Duvall in it. There is an amazing car chase shootout scene in the rain in that movie, and it's just the way they do the sound and the way they cut it together and everything was one of the most memorable moments in a movie that I think is ultimately forgettable, but it was really good.
That's a good example.
Would you mind going next while I think of something?
No, I can go. I do want to go back to that Darth Maul fight because, man, I have just gone back and watched that scene over and over and over again. There is something so incredible about that moment where they are separated by that electronic beam, and Qui-Gon is just gone, and he's just he's hopping, waiting for that thing to come down to go back after Darth Maul. Mm-hmm. The adrenaline in that moment is absolutely incredible. I'm gonna go with the Angel scene in X-Men: The Last Stand. I didn't particularly like The Last Stand, but that stuff where it goes into Angel's childhood and him growing up, and it's really emotionally deep and emotionally powerful, and stands out to me as a really good scene in an otherwise bad movie. Did I give you enough time to find a substitute, Andrew?
Yeah, actually, I just thought of one. So, movie I really did not like was The Counselor. I don't know if you guys saw that one or not. It's the Ridley Scott movie that has every A-list actor in the world, and it's written by Cormac McCarthy. It had everything going for it. You had this brilliant cast, brilliant director, brilliant writer, and it was a terrible, terrible movie. but
The opposite of the producers, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wanted this movie to be a success. And there's a death scene for I'll just go ahead. It's Brad Pitt's death scene is like one of the most haunting things to watch, but it's so captivating. You're like, you can't look away from it, and it's the only good part of that entire movie.
I just thought of another one. The Hobbit movie overall is not a movie I love. I wouldn't say I hate it, I guess, but that Riddles in the Dark scene is absolutely astonishing. And I think it comes down to the fact that those are the two best actors in the movie doing amazing work.
Yep.
Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis. So, yeah, that's another one I could watch that scene over and over and over again in a movie that overall I was really disappointed by. That would be one of my other choices. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Thanks for taking us on that Sift quest. If you'd like to take us on a Sift quest, all you got to do is let us know. Again, you can hit me up on Twitter. That's at Aaron Dicer, or you can send an email. It's feedback@siftpop.com. If you'd like to ask a question of us, really anywhere you ask a question, if we find it, SoundCloud, wherever we can put it on the show. Before we close out, let's do some buried treasure. What's the one thing in pop culture that you want to let people know about? Can be from any area of pop culture. I'll go ahead and go first this time. Already mentioned this because you were doing quotes from the show. I just started watching Rick and Morty.
Good for you.
2 seasons down, short seasons, short episodes, was really quick to binge the first couple seasons. And actually, I think there's one episode of the 3rd season that's come out as a surprise on April 1st. I think they launched it as a surprise.
So good.
I haven't seen the last 2 episodes of season 2, and I haven't seen the first episode of season 3. So I've worked my way through it. I will say this about the show. Number one, I was really surprised by how adult it is. I didn't realize it was that adult.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when they say Adult Swim, they mean Adult Swim. And that surprised me. I will also say this. It is hilarious. It is really funny, not just because of the character work and the writing. It's really funny because of the sci-fi stuff. The sci-fi stuff that I almost don't want to say parody, because they almost do their own, like, real version of it, is really smart. You can tell they've got some people on staff, or at least some consultants that are from the scientific community, because some of that stuff is brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's really funny, scientifically very smart. The sci-fi stuff is really clever, and it's hilarious. But yes, be forewarned, it is very much an adult show, not for kids.
Well, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland are geniuses.
Same guy behind Community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense.
That is another show that I need to get into. It's something that I think everybody who has ever seen it has told me that I need to watch. I have seen 1 or 2 episodes of it, and I liked it. It was, but I just never thought to like just go and try to find a way to binge it ever. So like my whole Rick and Morty thing has been trying to find it on Adult Swim, and usually it's not on at the time that I flip over. So it's something that I'll have to binge at some point. I know it's good.
Were you surprised by the continuity that went throughout the entire series?
Yes. Yeah, that's another really cool thing about it is, so many comedies, and it's understandable, they do their episode and then they throw all that stuff out and do a new episode,
Yeah.
In this really has some callbacks. Almost every episode there are great callbacks going on. So yeah, it's really interesting in that way, and I like it. Chris,
what is your buried treasure?
I guess I got a couple on this one too. One is Love on Netflix. There's 2 seasons of it. Stars Paul Rust and Gillian Jacobs, who from the aforementioned Community is on it. I think the show is pretty well done. It's a Judd Apatow backed show. But it's kind of like it's got some nerdy bent to it, because Paul Rust is definitely that, he plays that kind of nerdy guy or whatever. But there's a lot of like fun things in it, in addition to being a pretty good, romantic comedy type of show. The other one would be Billions on Showtime.
Oh,
I
yes.
think that's a good show.
This season has been incredible, hasn't it? It's
been a great season, and the last episode that came out was one of the better episodes of television I'd seen in quite some time. This season has been better than the first season, which I thought was a pretty good start. And this one has been great, and this last episode that came out was awesome. So
Yeah, there's something about that they're really locking in on about the relationship between Giamatti's character and what's the guy's name who was in Homeland?
Damian Lewis.
Yeah, Lewis. They're really locking in on what makes that relationship exciting and interesting to watch. And I think season 2 has taken full advantage of that. Yeah, you're right. The final episode, the last episode I saw, is it the finale of the season? Or is there another one coming?
There's one more, I believe, coming up because they've sort of. I think that was penultimate. They sort of set up something for the next episode, which will probably lead us into the next season or whatever. I don't know how that show does ratings wise, but I think it's great. You were talking about that dynamic of the relationship and everything. There's no decision that these guys can make that doesn't. Like they can hurt the other guy, but there's always a sort of a consequence to what they do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that's why it's so interesting to me, because every time they go for a play, it's like, yeah, I'm going to get him to do this, but it also comes back on them somehow. So it's I love how that does that.
And Giamatti is so good. He's just such a great actor.
Oh yeah,
I've been on the fence about trying to pick up that show, like whether I should do it or not. So you guys think I should go ahead and do it?
Yeah, I'd give it a huge recommend.
Okay.
It's one of those shows that's exciting to watch because it's like people trying to, one up each other or, pull the, rug out from somebody. I'm like, it's like there's some real clever plotting that happens in the show that I really enjoy. So.
And one of the guys behind it, Brian Koppelman, has his own podcast. He does. He has a big podcast, and he also was one of the writers of Rounders for people who love poker type stuff. He was one of the writers of that. So, I had heard him on his podcast talking about this show for a long time, and yeah, they think they've hit their stride this season.
The podcast, by the way, is called The Moment with Brian Koppelman, and he talks to famous people about kind of the defining moment in their career and those kind of things.
The moment. Me?
Yeah. What do you got, Andrew?
I have a web series that I picked up that is fascinating to watch.
Okay.
It's called Day 5. Have you heard of this?
No, not at all.
So it's about this worldwide epidemic. It's sci-fi, so keep that in mind. And it's also very adult because of what goes on in the show. So Day 5 is about this worldwide epidemic that goes across the world where if you fall asleep, you will die. And it's people having to stay awake for days upon days until somebody can find a cure. So it starts you off on the 5th day. Like every now and then it goes back and forth and it shows you like day 1 through 4. But it starts off on day 5 and people are, I'll go ahead and say it, they have to take like cocaine and amphetamines and crack just to stay awake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's people like hallucinating. It's very psychedelic.
If the choice was cocaine or death, I'd choose cocaine.
Yeah. So it's like people like hallucinating and stuff because, your mind goes crazy after a while without sleep. So what these people start seeing and stuff is like, it's horrifying. And like seeing what people will do to stay awake, like stabbing themselves, just to get that adrenaline rush. And it's very captivating. It's actually, surprisingly, it's a Rooster Teeth show.
Oh, interesting.
So if you like Red versus Blue or Ruby or anything, it's their drama series, live action, and the main guy is a Heath Ledger doppelganger. It's creepy, like how much he looks like Heath Ledger.
Wow. Is he as talented as Heath Ledger?
I don't see this guy winning an Oscar, but he's not bad. It's a fun show.
Well, especially for a web series, you think of it's not necessarily on a major network or anything like that.
Yeah. 6 episodes in season 1. They say they're filming season 2 right now. I really recommend it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, there you go. We did it, guys.
Hey!
Well done.
Huzzah.
Podcasting has happened. Thanks so much for joining us today. Siftpop is part of the Studio DNA podcast network. You can find out more about other live and later shows on the network by following the feed at mixlr.com/studiodna. That's mixlr.com/studiodna. Huge thanks again to today's guru, Chris from CinemaSins in the Sincast.
Yay!
Chris, you got anything that you want to plug, let people know about?
You can go to the Sincast about everywhere where podcasts can be found. And, of course, we are the people behind CinemaSins, Everything Wrong With, on YouTube. So completely different experiences, probably.
You know what? That's good. That's a good thing to say, because I think people might not understand that. People who love CinemaSins may not realize that the podcast is really, in many ways, much more, I don't know how to put it other than to say, like, movie positive. You know, it's you guys loving movies as opposed to finding the nitpicky things wrong with them for humor's sake. You know, one is the podcast to me feels like a more authentic look into who you guys are and how you really feel about movies, whereas the Everything Wrong with videos are a comedic entertainment piece. Does that make sense?
That is absolutely correct.
So
I couldn't say it better than myself.
So yeah, I think that's important to know. And if you love movies, I think the Sincast will be a lot of fun for you. Again, like everything else we've mentioned, Billions, Rick and Morty, it is an adult podcast.
Yeah, we swear on that podcast quite a bit.
That is the short way to say it. Yes, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Much love and gratitude also to our Patreon supporters for giving monthly to make this show and others on the network possible. Support starts at $3 a month. Comes with some pretty fun perks. You can find out more at patreon.com/studiodna. And if you want to connect, there's a lot of ways to do so. You can do that at SoundCloud. You can tweet at us, hit up iTunes, or you can email us feedback@siftpop.com. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like it too, so make sure you let them know about it, and that listening is much easier than making 700 consecutive space jumps. Spoiler chat for this week's movie should be up next in your podcast feed, and we will see you back next week, probably for some talk on King Arthur, I'm guessing.
Aww.
So we'll see you then.
Aha, you have to watch King Arthur, and I don't. Ha ha.
Thanks, Chris.